Hi, and welcome to Assignment 12, Reviewing the ELA Standards. This assignment will allow you to become acquainted with the ELA standards for your grade and also some of the grades that come before and after yours, and will also allow you to compare and contrast the Common Core state standards to your current California standards. So let's get started. The first thing that you want to make sure that you do is have all of the documents open and available to you so you can toggle through them easily. Here's what you will need. You're going to want to download a copy of the California Common Core State Standards for ELA. You can do that by clicking this link. You're also going to want to download the current California standards for ELA. You can do that by clicking this link. And then you're going to want the note sheet for ELA Standards Analysis. You can download that by clicking this link. When you download the note sheet, you'll get a Word doc, which means that you can either type directly into it or print a copy so that you can write on it. If you're using a tablet device like an iPad, you will not be able to print the document, nor will you be able to type directly into it, so you might want to have some paper next to you and create a similar document on a piece of scratch paper that you can kind of keep in your files. So let's get started by exploring the standards. The first thing that we're going to do is really think about just what we notice about the Common Core ELA standards. I know that you may have had an opportunity to look at them and you may not have, so this is an opportunity to just take some time and to really focus on what the Common Core standards are asking students to do. So we're going to bring up our copy of the California Common Core State Standards, and we're going to ask you to choose a grade band. So either choose grades K6 or 612, and that way you'll be able to look across some different grade levels. So we're going to choose, for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to choose K6. So we'll scroll through the K5 standards until we get to 612, and there it is. So when we start looking at the 612 standards, we're going to ask you to record some observations on your note sheet. And the note sheet looks like this, and you can see we've started filling it out so that we can have a model for you. One of the things that I'm noticing as I look at these standards is that the standards are aligned perfectly across the grade level. So standard number 1 has to do with citing textual evidence. It's consistent all the way across. So that's one thing that I'm writing down on my note sheet, is that the standards are aligned to each other across grade levels. I'm also noticing these different structures, or these different kind of clusters that they're organized into. So we've got key ideas and details, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas, so I'm also writing that down. And I'm doing this right now for reading. Of course, you'll want to look at writing, speaking and listening, and language as well. I'm noticing for literature, there are only 9 standards. Standard number 8 is not applicable to literature, so it doesn't align to the anchor standard that is in the national document. So when I look at informational reading, I might want to really pay attention to standard number 8 to find out what that expectation is for students. So I'm just going to record that on my note sheet, that there are only 9 standards in literature as opposed to 10. One other thing that I'm noticing as I go a little deeper in looking at the language of the standards is that the standards, with every standard, it seems like the skill connects to a larger purpose of understanding text, particularly with the reading. For example, I'm thinking, with number 2, determine a theme or central idea of a text and how it is conveyed. When I'm looking at number 4, I see determine the meaning of words and phrases as they're used in a text, analyze the impact of a specific word choice on meaning and tone. So it seems like there's this constant expectation that students are thinking about not only what they're noticing about text, but why it's there, how it contributes to an overall purpose or meaning. This one as well. Analyze how a particular sentence, chapter, scene, or stanza fits into the overall structure of text and contributes to the development of the theme, setting, or plot. So there's this larger purpose for looking at pieces of text. And that's something that I'm noticing in the standards as well. There's also this really interesting expectation here that students will read complex text for their appropriate grade level. So in number 10, for example, it talks about how students by the end of the year need to read and comprehend literature in the grades 6 through 8 text complexity band proficiently, and they're going to need maybe scaffolding at the high end of the range so students get closer to that 8th grade range. And what I know about the language arts standards in California is that there isn't that same level of expectation explicitly stated in the standards the way that it's explicitly stated here. So I'm thinking that text complexity piece is really important. Once you have an opportunity to scroll through all of the standards for the grade band, and keep in mind that if you're looking at 612, even if you teach middle school, it's really important to also look at the high school standards. And if you're teaching high school, it's also really important to look at the middle school standards so that you understand not only what students are bringing with them as they come to you, but also what they're going to be able to use in the future and how they can build on some of the skills that you teach them in your class. Once you have an opportunity to look at these Common Core standards and just make some general observations, then we're going to ask you to look at the California state standards, the current ones that we're using, so that we can really analyze how they're different, because that will also guide our instruction in the classroom. So we'll kind of put these Common Core state standards off to the side and bring up our California standards in this document. And of course you can link to both of these documents as you saw in the Schoology Assignment 12. I'm going to click on grade 6 and start there. And what my purpose is to really think about how these standards are different from what the Common Core says. So I'm going to look through here and kind of some of these reading standards. And since I was looking at literature before, I'm going to scroll down to the literary analysis section in the California standards. And the first thing that I see is that this says identify the forms of fiction and describe the major characteristics of each form. That's a major difference. That really isn't super important in the Common Core state standards. So I'm going to just jot that down in my two-column chart here. Another thing that I'm noticing is that analyzing language and pieces like that seems sort of like an end in itself. For example, it just says define how tone or meaning is conveyed in poetry through word choice, figurative language, sentence structure, line length, punctuation, rhythm, repetition, and rhyme. So really it feels like that standard just sort of stops with the language use, and there's maybe not a larger purpose. In this standard, identify the speaker and recognize the difference between first and third person narration. Again, not really a larger purpose to why we would want to identify the speaker or why we would want to understand the difference before first and third person narration. Whereas in Common Core, there is a larger purpose with most of the standards. I'm also noticing that there are a lot of uses of the word identify and lower level verbs in the California standards. For example, we have define, identify, 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 explain. Very few instances of analyze or critique. Whereas if we look at the California Common Core standards, we have determine a theme, describe, analyze, explain, compare and contrast, and of course that language gets even more sophisticated as we go through the grade bands. So it feels like there are just lower level thinking skills embedded into the California standards as opposed to the Common Core. So that's another difference that I'm going to be recording in my sheet. Certainly we want you to have an opportunity to really explore the entire breadth of the standards. So when you're looking at the standards, you don't have to just stop with reading for literature. Certainly we'd want you to look at the informational text reading, the writing, the speaking, the listening, the language, so that you get a really broad picture of how the Common Core state standards differ from language arts, and so that you can think about how that impacts your work in the classroom or at your school every single day. Once you have an opportunity to do that and really dig into the standards, we're going to ask you to go back to the Schoology forum, so I'll minimize these screens. And if you click Next here, you'll see that that says Assignment 12 Discussion, and this is going to take you to a discussion forum in which you can have conversations with your colleagues. You can do this online by typing into this box here, or you can do this in person with a group of colleagues that you're working with. So if you have a learning team at your school, or if you're using this for your 6 hours, your professional development time that returned to us, then you might want to just have that discussion in person, and that's okay. We hope you enjoy exploring the standards and that you really see some differences between Common Core and California.